Alright, hello. This is Harry from the Foundryborne team. It's been suggested a few times that perhaps we could make a video, try to showcase the system, try to show some of its features and what you can do with it. Got a little bit of an order of the day over here. We'll have to see just how well I can stick to that, how much I ramble and what kinds of good information I actually can convey. So, Foundry Virtual Tabletop. There's a lot of features to it, a lot of things you can do with it, aside from the systems. And I'm not going to focus on the Foundry side itself, but I am going to mention things and how they're done when I think of it while I'm going through the system itself. So, first of all, well, you want a system, and you want Daggerheart as a system, Foundryborne specifically. There are two different systems, and the one that is Foundryborne is just called Daggerheart. We're going to install that one. And as far as modules go, there are a lot of different modules available on Foundry, ones that are specific to Foundryborne, and a lot of them that are agnostic, that is to say they can be used with any system. Our recommendation when starting out with Foundryborne is to go light on the modules, try it without, and then you'll notice what kind of features you think are missing, or if there's any visuals you'd like to spice up in some different way. I'm just going to bring in one module for this, and that is Dice So Nice. It simply adds some visuals of dice rolling across the screen as you do dice rolls. It's kind of nice, and we have some integrations with it to go with the fear and hope parts of Daggerheart. So once you have a system, you are able to create a world where you can name it something, you can give it different login pictures and different metadata and so on, and you would select Daggerheart as your system to use. Now, I have already started the world here. There's nothing special about it. I've just added in a few basic placeholder maps in the background from my Incarnate collection, just some online maps. And I'm not making use of any specific pictures or anything, so the characters and adversaries and such will look kind of bland, but that's the way it goes. I'd rather not go into any issues with sharing pictures here and there. So hopping into this showcase, we're going to start from the beginning. So just a little placeholder map from one of my campaigns a long time ago. And the first thing when you get into Foundry, well, you have a lot of things going on here. We have the current scene we're at right now, and the players that are logged in, which is just me at this moment. I haven't set up any others. So, everyone will want a character as you come in, and you can do that over in these tabs at the side here. We have the Actors tab specifically. Actors are characters, adversaries, companions, environments, and also the party, where all the characters in a party are conglomerated together. So we will make a test character right now to step through these things. So first of all, it is kind of empty. There's not a lot to it because it's not set up yet. It's still level 0. And there are two ways to make a character. You can either, which recommended, you can go through the character setup. And we're going to do that first of all. So as you go into it, you have these different steps of making a character, which starts with selecting your class and your subclass. Clicking on these cards here will open up the Compendium browser, which will show you all the available classes, subclasses, and later on the ancestry community and so forth. So let's make us a rogue, why not? And we'll make it a syndicate rogue. Just drag them over to these cards, and whether it be homebrew or some other use case, you can also just drag these kinds of classes and subclasses from other places. For instance, from the item bar over here. So you don't have to bring them from the compendium, but you can. We will make an ancestry for ourselves, a part of the heritage, and we have those available here, and you can also notice that we can indeed have a mixed ancestry. So if we, for instance, would enable that, then we would select our primary ancestry first. Let's make it an elf. You can see these are the two features that you get for being an elf. You have quick reactions, that is the top one. You have celestial trance, that is the bottom one. And when you when you have a mixed ancestry in Daggerheart, then you always have one top and one bottom feature. So you can never have both of the top ones. Of course, Feel free to homebrew as you wish, but that's something you change around at your own pace. If we would like to switch these around, we would simply pull them the other way around. We have a fairy elf here. We can also name them something else, if we would prefer some lore-wise descriptor you have. So going forward, we have a community, and of course all of these you can open them up to view their descriptions, or you can find them within the compendiums, but we're going to get to that later. We're going to be a loreborn, because why not? Studious. And well, this one has to be, the width has to be adjusted a little bit, but all the same. You have some starting traits, and these are just the standard array, so to speak, the numbers that are expected by Daggerheart. These can be adjusted in the system settings, which we're going to go through later. You can either select them manually to put them in the desired positions, or you can use the suggested traits, which each class, we selected the rogue, have a suggested list of traits. For right now, we're just going to select that. Then you always start with 2 experiences, and we should probably add some labels here, but what's going on here is that you have 2 experiences, and we will call them something, and I'm not very creative right now. Let's call it, Oh, well, I'm really on the spot. Let's call it, well, I will call it Experience 1, because, yes, I'm very creative right now. That is the name of the experience, and the second box here is just a little bit of a description. You're able to write down anything you'd like, anything that you and the GM come up to, or anything that will remind you kind of what you meant by it. Because in Daggerheart, experiences can be pretty much anything, and maybe it's a phrase or something, and in that case it might be helpful for you to kind of summarize your thoughts on what you actually meant when you come up with it. But this description is really not shown that much. You can just get it on hover, which we'll see in this in the sheet once we're done here. I'll just call it a test description. And then we have our experience number 2. And that one does not have a description. Let me go on to the domain cards. So for a rogue, our domains are Midnight and Grace. You are able to customize those. You can customize pretty much anything in the system. If you just go on to the rogue class, you can make a copy of it. You can also, in the system settings, have more domains than this, if you want to go outside of the norm. But we'll get to it. So we have 2 cards at level 1 available, and we can pick those out. We can pick Rain of Blades and Enrapture, because why not? And we have some starting armor. You're supposed to start with a set of armor and primary secondary weapon, or a 2-handed weapon, and you can either pick the suggested ones for the rogue, or you can pick anything you'd like. There's no real restrictions. This one is a bit of a special. It's a current implementation for a domain card where you don't use armor, so it's not really an armor. In this case, we are just going to pick the Gambeson armor, the dagger, and the small dagger. And we have some starting equipment that everyone starts out with, and we also get a choice of a health potion, a minor stamina potion, and some bit of background stuff here. Some forgery tools, a grappling hook. Other classes might get things like the picture of a lover or an unidentified book or some such. You can definitely homebrew those around or not have those, but we're just following the way the system is set up here. So, we're already done. We finished the character and everything is filled in. So what we're going to next now then is that we're going to go do some sheet navigation here. Figure out what's going on in all of this. So, we have our portrait over here, which you can click on to select another picture and to get the look you want for it. We have over here, when you hover it, the spellcasting trait for our class. As a syndicate rogue, we have finesse for it. You can see that we have the resources for the class. We have the HP, the stress of it. We have evasion, armor slots, which currently none because we don't have an armor equipped. We have our damage thresholds, which are also very low because we don't have that armor equipped. And then in the sidebar we also have our experiences, and you can see that description we made earlier showing up when you hover it. We have our current loadout of the main cards, and we also have the unarmed attack showing up here because we don't have a weapon equipped. If you equip a weapon, then the unarmed strike will not show here. You can see all of the choices we made here, our class, our subclass, our ancestry, and our community. And you can also click those to get them open, and you can peruse their different features and what's available here. But this is mostly for reference, because everything is already copied to the character itself. You have the traits that we picked earlier, and clicking on those will allow you to make a roll with this trait. This dialogue, we'll go over it in a little bit, but this is the roll dialogue, with a lot of options to cater to everything that the system permits. You can see the domains inherent to your class here, and we have options for taking a short rest or a long rest, which you do throughout gameplay. And when you do so, you get to pick a number of moves, a number of downtime moves. You can also here see refreshing of resources, because a lot of things, a lot of domain cards and other features refresh on a rest or on a session end or when going to a new scene and so forth. And it's summarized here what's going to happen. You would simply pick, either just do them one by one, or you could pick multiples at a time to do. In this case we are an elf, or a fairy elf to be precise, so we have access to an additional move. Normally it would be 2. We have a lot of different tabs here with the information and features of the character. The first one is the features, and we have what our ancestry has given us. We have the community, we have our class features, the subclass feature, and there's also a tab down below for any custom stuff coming in. Maybe you've added something extra to them, or, well, anything really. Anything goes down here. We have our loadout, where we have the different domain cards. These are the ones currently in the loadout. By Daggerheart rules, you can have up to 5 cards there. This can be customized. And everything else will go into the vault. And you're able to swap them back and forth, either when you're not in a stressful situation like resting, or for their recall cost. So for instance, if you had Rain of Blades down in the vault, you would be able to recall it for 1 stress in the middle of combat to get it available to you, swapping it with something else, which you can do directly via the recall button to spend a stress to do it. So we have the inventory, we have all our different equipment here. With the quantity of them, you're able to equip an armor, which we should do. You can see that our thresholds go up, and we gain some armor slots available for use. We have our weaponry, so we can equip a dagger. We can also equip a small dagger, because this is a secondary weapon. We have our different coinage going on here. We have the coins, handfuls, bags, and chests. Can be customized, but those are the standards. In the biography, we have some basic character information you can fill in, and you can see that some is already here, because these are the standard questions for the background and connections that comes with the game, and we fill those in automatically when you do character creation via the character creator. You can, of course, remove these entirely or fill them in if you would like to answer them and make use of them. And then we have the effects tab, where there's a lot of stuff going on over here. Basically, a lot of the features that your character has will in some way modify the underlying data of the character, how many hit points they have, how much stress, how much damage they deal, and so on. And those show up here. And you can see that these can be inactive, like sneak attack is currently not applying any extra damage. But you can have it enabled, and the same thing goes for these. We're wearing an armor that gives us +1 to evasion, so if we were to disable that, it goes down to 12. And we also then have this open settings. That's for editing the character, and we can modify stuff here. A lot of this goes under a bit of homebrewing territory, or a bit of GM allowance, so to speak, because, well, we already picked our traits, but maybe we did something wrong. We want to change what it is, or we've gained some special bonus during gameplay. Same thing goes, we can increase the HP, we can add scars to our character, and a lot of other things. We can also edit what our experiences are named, and add descriptions to them, or add new experiences if we've somehow gained them. Yes, so we have our hope resource. I don't know if I mentioned it per se, but it goes up and down. And in the same vein, our HP and our stress goes up and down. And this is a bit of a not a caveat per se, but it's something that a lot of people can get a bit confused about, because many people come from a background of D&D or other games where you typically start at, well, your max HP. You have 6 hit points, and then you go down all the way to 0, and then you start some kind of dying or unconscious mechanic. But in Daggerheart, they specifically use a language of marking resources and clearing them. Which in this case then means that you mark 2 HP because you took a major hit of damage, for instance. Well, then you mark 2 points and you go upwards. And when you reach the maximum, that's when you start to get into death territory, where you're making death moves. Let's see, we've gone through a bit of the character sheet and what goes on. Well, the rolling, I suppose. Mentioned that before. So you're making a trait roll, and by standard it's a d12 and a d12, but there are different things that can modify this, different features, different monster abilities and other things, so you're able to modify this on the fly as the situation demands. You're able to apply your experiences, always a discussion of course with the GM in play, what goes on here, and this will cost stress to use, or hope to use, I mean, which you can see down here that we're adding some of this. And it's also 1 out of 2 because we currently only have 2. So we can use those as we please, and maybe we have advantage. And since we are a, let's see, what is it called? We are a lore-born community. That means that we actually have some advantages here. You should usually have it when this is true. There's a little reminder here. The same thing would show up on disadvantage if you had some specific situations where that should apply. So you can select advantage, and it's typically a d6 dice, but if there's any specific situation, you can get it working here with multiple dice or different sizes of them. We rolled for agility, but we can always change it out over here if something has changed, and this mostly comes up if there's a saving throw or some kind of button you clicked where you didn't get to immediately choose. Then you can always modify it here if something is more applicable. And if there is any kind of random bonus that is not automated or that the GM gives you on the fly, then you can always just add something here, a dice value or a numerical one. These costs can be crossed out if for any reason you should not be paying the cost of it, just to get it working. And you can also customize if this roll should be visible to everyone, or if it's only to the GM, only to yourself, and such. That will go into the chat over here. I think I made a testing roll here before, what do you know? Those correlate to these settings down here, which are common to Foundry, just to see where your messages end up as you write them. So let's make a roll here. So we're going to pay 1 hope, because we spent an experience. And you can see here that we made an agility check. We rolled a 19 with hope, and we did a 10 on the hope dice, a 6 on the fear dice. You are able to re-roll these results by just clicking on these dice. So if you had any sort of ability that lets you do so, for one reason or another, you can just re-roll it. Of course I re-rolled the same number, but now I re-rolled a 3. And that is updated in the score of it. And you didn't see any funny dice or anything going on right now. That's because we did not have the module enabled just yet, the Dice So Nice, which you can do via managing your modules, and we're going to enable it, which will reload the page to start with. So we still have our test character going on, and if we were now to make a roll, just standard, then you will see some dice coming out. These are our customized looks for them, with the hope dice being a golden kind of yellow and the fear one being a cold blue. A general thing in the system is that whenever you're presented with a dialogue in some way, you're always able to hold shift when you click, and that will skip that dialogue. Useful in some cases, but it's always good to go into the dialogue as well, just so you get all your options and don't miss anything. These dice colors can be customized. I'm not going ahead of myself now. We're coming to that when we get to the system settings. So, we have some more stuff we can use. We can use our domain cards, we can do attacks with our weapons. Making an attack is very much the same kind of window, the same kind of stats, and so on going with it. But a weapon, of course, has some damage as well. We're attacking with our dagger, which has some damage on it, and this dialog, you can see that our current damage is a d8 plus 1 plus 2. The plus 1 is simply because the dagger has that damage, but the 2 actually comes from the paired feature. This is because we have a small dagger equipped at the moment. The secondary weapon will give you additional damage, and the reason this is pre-checked here, because you can enable and disable these extra sources of damage, is because the paired is currently active. That means that it gets pre-selected here, because we assume that it should be there. On the other hand, we have sneak attack, which was currently inactive, which means that you can still apply it here if you have a situation where sneak attack should apply. So you can kind of customize your effects in that way, that okay, this one is more often than not enabled, let's say, while this one mostly is. So you don't have to do as much micromanagement to it all. Let's say we have none of these, we have no situational bonuses, so we make a roll and we get some damage. This dice I haven't customized how it looks, you can do that in the settings. You can see the damage being updated here. And one thing I didn't do that you can commonly forget is that when you're trying to do damage to someone or affect someone, you should be targeting in the system, in Foundry in general. So let's say I pull out our character on the canvas here. So yeah, he's very big, bigger than a house. And we bring out a character here, Biggie Damage. Yes, he's a very official character. If we were to do an attack once more, and we attack this adversary, let's see if we hit first of all. Well, we rolled with hope. And we can see that we hit Biggie Damage. He's our target here because I targeted him. Now, I did that by just hovering this token and pressing the T key. It was a bit of muscle memory, I didn't even think about it. You can do that to target, you can distarget, you can hold shift to click on multiples. And one thing, let's see, can you actually see that here now? You can see it in the previous one because this one is finished. But you are able to do it after the fact. I think there is currently a bug where it doesn't always happen if you were to forget to target initially. Excuse me, I'm just going to let in the dog that's being loud. Alright. So, we can target, and now we have something targeted. We can do our damage once more. We have 7 points plus 1. We have 8 points of damage coming in, and we can deal this damage to Biggie. We can see that he died, because I haven't really set him up very much. He doesn't have a lot of HP, and we dealt his severe threshold of damage, which is 3 hit points. So he's currently dead. If we bring him back from the dead, we can also make use of our domain cards. You can simply click on these pictures. You can see the dice appearing, that you can use them. You are also able to use the context menu to use the item, and a lot of other things if you just want to show others what this card does, if you talk about it and so on. Bit of funny label there, those things happen. If we were to use Rain of Blades, this one has multiple actions set on it to handle the different features of it. You can do the cast of it, where you're spending a hope to deal damage, and you can also do this additional damage with this action. Some features are set up that way to handle it more appropriately. If we're to do the cast, we're doing a spellcast roll here with finesse, spending some hope to do it, and yeah, it's pretty much the same in that way. In this case, I doubt I'm gonna hit that one. I did actually. Biggie is not very strong. I rolled a critical even. So we have a lot of damage coming in that will be applied to Biggie if we choose to do so, but we're going to spare him this time. Now, we have an armor equipped, and in Daggerheart you can use your armor to block damage that's coming in. And I'm going to use Biggie here, who is very, very optimized for damage. I gave him some really cheaty damage here, just so it's always very high. And let's see if he can hit you. And actually, first of all, I'm going to select this new character we made. What did we call him? Just test character, right? And assign him to myself. This is something you should do for each player, each user, because we do have some features, like using armor, that will apply to your assigned character here. which is different than just owning the character. Because you can also assign ownership to a player. Currently we don't have any players here because I haven't added any. But you can always assign that they are an owner to a character and they should own their own character. But you should also assign them here to get all the features working properly. Let's go back to making this longbow action. Oh, and that's very good. That's definitely going to beat the evasion, so we have a hit going on. And I'm going to roll some damage. For biggie damage. It's a big hit, of course. So when we deal this damage, since we have an armor equipped, you're going to get a damage reduction dialogue, showing you what you're able to do here. You're currently about to take severe damage, but normally a character can only use 1 point of armor per time they take damage, and we don't have anything special on this rogue, so we can choose to do that. So instead take major damage. You can see we took 2 hit point damage, 1 armor, and that's also shown in a summary over here on the right side. This can be disabled if you don't like this behavior. So that happens. Some characters can use multiple points of armor or use stress or other features to also reduce damage as applicable, but test character cannot. So that's a bit of navigating the sheet. I think we hopefully got a lot of it. I suppose Biggie over here, the adversary, his sheet is kind of similar, as you can see. The attacks, the experience and everything. The adversaries also have a reaction roll button, because by standard, an adversary simply rolls a d20, doesn't add anything to do a reaction. They can also apply their experiences at the cost of fear, or anything else that's applicable. They also have their effects. You can have notes over here if you want to have some notes on how they should be run, or anything else that strikes your fancy. You can see that it's a tier 1 character, it's ranged, that's its category in Daggerheart, and it's at medium size. That's something we're going to come back to in a little bit. You can also edit on an adversary, and there's a lot to this. We're going to go over that a bit later probably in the advanced section, I think so, yeah. So, I think for now we're done with the sheet, and we're going to talk a little bit about the compendiums and the browser, because a lot of these features that were added here are class, subclass, and a lot of other things, the items, everything like that comes from the compendiums that we package with the system. You can see them over on the compendium packs tab over here, and opening it up you can see that we have a list of all the adversaries that are packaged with the Daggerheart SRD, the content that we're allowed to share thanks to Darrington Press, and all of them are in here. So they are available, so to speak, raw in here. You can open them up, look at them, and you can pull them into your world as you please. As so, you can edit them over here and make use of them. There are the environments. We have some role tables for that are in the rules, and we have all the character options. So we have the classes and their features that go onto these, and some class items and a lot of other things. The domains packaged in their various domains and by level and such. But there is also a more convenient method usually to access these, and that is the Compendium browser. You can access this in a few of these tabs, for instance, such as in the Compendium Packs tab, but it's also available in the Items tab, in the Actors tab, and I think in the journal? No, not in the journal. If you open it up, you can get a list of everything here, and since we opened it from items, it defaulted to opening up all the items over here. You can search through them, you can sort on different things. You can also back out to just get a list of everything you could search for here. So it's a bit more convenient that way. It's a nice feature. This will also pick up any custom things you have. If you have added any custom compendiums, those can be added by modules, or you could add them in your specific world to organize things. And they will be picked up here. It's possible in the future that will allow you to pick which sources you'd like to use. It's not currently there, but it's been discussed to some degree. You can also reach the compendium if you're, for example, in the inventory. you can add a weapon, and it will prompt you to either create a new one, which will just make a blank one here for you to edit, or by opening the compendium and dragging one out. It's a general feature that you can drag things into their respective categories to add new stuff. A little bit about that, and I suppose, well, beast forms. I put this here, so sure, I guess we can do that. I will just quickly make a druid, because druids are able to use a beast form. Let's find it to start off with, and we will make this some manner of ancestry. We'll give it some manner of community, use the standard traits, give it some experience, and have that done. And now we have us a druid, and this druid is able to use beast form. Beast form, the reason I bring it up here is because we have this character. When using this feature, you are able to, depending on how it's set up, what level you are and so on, you can choose different forms to change into, and that is handled automatically. This is just the default picture, because we can't really add any official art, sadly. We don't have any permissions for that, so we just have some stock pictures from Foundry as placeholders where applicable. You're able to cancel this beast form and go about your way, but the customized part here comes in because you could, maybe you want to actually have some funny pictures, you have some neat stuff going on locally and you want to add that in. And an easy way to do that, you can just pull out beast form from the compendium into your world, and then you can customize it there. Any duplicate, so to speak, this Agile Scout will be preferred over the one in the compendium, so both won't be showed, yours will overwrite it, so to speak. And looking at the beast form, you are able to customize it if you'd like, but more prominently here you can also change what it looks like. And this could be I had a little cheat sheet there, so I don't have to do it live. This could be a set image. This is just a test image I have going on here of a whale kind of thing. And if I was to use a beast form now, then it would select that image. I now have that whale icon going on. You can also cancel a beast form there. Another nice thing you can do is that Foundry allows something called wildcards, that is this little star here. That simply means that any image in this folder path I've set up here, that then ends in SVG but is called something. Any of those are viable, and I have 4 different ones set up, and if it finds multiples, then you're able to choose at the time when you transform. So you will have a selection of images here. This can be useful because beast forms typically comprise of multiple different things. They're not strictly one singular creature, so it's something you can set up if you'd like to, but you don't have to. We select one and we turn into that one. And this was a small creature, so it downsized a fair bit. So that's something you may want to do if you're playing with druids. Where to go next? I have countdowns written down here. You may be seen this little UI box over here. You are able to use countdowns. It's a prominent feature of Daggerheart as a system, and you can open this up and add new countdowns. So there is a standard kind of permissions going on here, so that when you make a new countdown, you can set it to default and it will be whatever this is. So by standard, any countdowns you make, the players can see, but they can't edit them, because that would require ownership. You can also make it standard none or anything you please, or you can make a little override here, just to initially not have them see it, when you for instance make something going on in the background they shouldn't know about just yet. But we make a new countdown, and we can change the name of it to something. We can edit the image that is shown if we'd like, and the permissions that were mentioned, well, I don't have any players here right now, that's a bit of an oversight, but they would be listed one by one, and it would either be the default ownership, which would be this one, or you can set it manually, because maybe one of the characters can see it and the others can't. or any other such situation. We have the start value for a countdown. It could start at 4. It automatically raises the current one there because it should always start at the maximum. And then it can go down from there. We can go down for any reason what the countdown might have. We can also have a randomized start value formula. This is mostly used because adversaries can have actions that automatically create one or more countdowns in a predefined way, and many of those can have like a d6 as their maximum, and that will be rolled to customize how quick the countdown goes. But you can also make use of it here if you'd like. Now I just roll and we see that's 3. So it's changed to 3 as the new maximum. They can have different categorization, narrative and counter. It's not used at the moment, but it's something we'll probably add some kind of organization to later. Countdowns can be custom by default, how they progress. That simply means that you would handle it fully manually, going up and down. They can also automatically progress. So for instance, if you were to set it to, say, fear, whenever a dice was rolled with fear as a part of a duality roll, then it would automatically count down. You are always able to still do it manually, but it's a neat bit of automation if you'd like to make use of it. There are also looping countdowns, because when it reaches 0, some of them should just start over as they are. That is looping behavior. So right now you can see this one is looping. If I go down, you can either just press, well, actually I think, yeah, you have to press here. Then you can just get it looping. And in this case, this was a 1d6, so it rolled again to see what the new maximum should be. If this was not present here, and we had a 3-3, then when we go down, it would simply start at 3 again. If we instead choose increasing, that kind of behavior means that when this happens, it will have a higher maximum. There are some abilities that work like that. Likewise for decreasing. So you can have all kinds of behaviors going on here, and since this lights up, it will hopefully help you to remember to loop your countdowns and not leave them hanging. You can have multiple countdowns going on here, yeah, countdowns are a neat little feature. You can minimize this box a little bit to make it smaller, and there is an option to disable this window. Maybe you have some other module that implements it that you prefer, or maybe you don't use countdowns at all. You can do that if you'd like to. I have scenes mentioned, and we are at the scene right now, and there are some options going with that. There are a lot of Foundry-specific basic things here, and I will not be going over a lot of them. Just one that's probably worth mentioning is that by default, a scene does not have global illumination, as it's called, and that means that any player character here will just see it completely dark, because there's no light, there's no illumination. The ways to handle that is either to enable global illumination, that just means they can see everything, there is no darkness at all. Or you can have it off, and in that case you can instead place out some lights here and there. It's a bit more custom work to do, but it can make some very nice scenes. Now I have some basic light in this area, you can have a different light here with different coloration and so on. Foundry offers a lot of customization that way to make as fantastic scenes as you'd like. But the main part I wanted to get to is that we've added a little Daggerheart section over here, and it has some use cases. First of all, in Foundry you have something called a ruler, so you can actually find it. Here we go. That lets you measure distances from places. You can drag it over here and you can see that we are in melee range, very close, close, yeah, far, and then we have very far over here. This is defined in our system settings, and I promise I will get there eventually. I have it somewhere in the line here. And that just gives us these labels that are used in Daggerheart, and they correspond to some kind of actual measurement. Those can be changed, but you can also change them per scene, because, well, right now we're in a city, and this is not much of a battle map kind of situation, so maybe these distances are very large and it doesn't make sense to you to use those labels. It could still make sense. You could just customize that you think that in this map it should be this far. You can do that on custom to change these values, not use the default ones for this map. You can also choose to disable it completely. And if you do so, then we just use the standard Foundry, and then you will see it measured in feet instead. 5 feet per, well, a square if this was in a grid, but right now it's just a setting on the map. I think we have it in grid, right? Yeah, so it has 5 feet in distance, and you could make that bigger, lower, maybe you have a travel map, a big world, and so on. So that's a neat feature there, to disable it for those kinds of things, where it makes more sense to use some other measurement. The other thing we have available on scenes are what's called scene environments, because we haven't touched them yet, but another kind of actor are the environments that exist in Daggerheart, and those can be used as is. You could pull them out onto a scene, but typically, well, you don't really have a tavern in front of you, well, not as a token anyway. It's usually not the way they're used. You would probably just use them over here from... Can I actually... Okay, there. Just open them up from here and make use of their features. You could send some text out for the players to read, or make use of maybe the bar fight deals damage, and so on. Make use of the different adversaries that are available here. There are listed. There are guards, mercenaries, and other people around in the tavern that are listed here. But what you can also do is that a lot of the time we've found that many scenes when you're playing might just have some kind of overarching scene environment going on. Like you have a map that is the tavern. Well, maybe it probably has a local tavern environment going on then, and you want some quick access to it without having to go over to this tab or have a hidden token lying around somewhere. Instead, you can just pull it over here and save, and then you get it available over here next to this scene. You can just open it up from there. We've also enabled that you are able to add multiples here, and if you do so, then clicking on this will bring up a little selection. And I think the latest one will be shown over here. You can access all of them this way. You can remove them if you don't have a use for it. Those are the scenes. Then, well, Daggerheart or GM menu. We've added a new menu over here on the side that some modules like to expand this one to add more different features. We haven't added anything more here right now, but I mentioned loosely earlier that some features are restored when you take a rest, at the end of a session, at the start of a session, and so on. And for those cases, like I think once per rest you can use this one. So when you try to make rest here, you can see that this gets restored again. You can also do this manually as a GM. Players cannot see this tab. You are able to select, well, everyone should restore their features as if you had had a short rest. And if you do so, then you can get everything refreshed. You can select multiples here. This one is particularly important if you have different, say a scene is over. Well, you want to refresh everything for the new scene. Or a new session is starting, then you can do that refresh over here. These two are not affected by taking rests, so this is something that the GM will have to do if they want to do it globally and not have everyone do it themselves. Yes, finally, the time has come for system settings. So in Foundry, you can enter the game settings down here, and you have configure settings. There are the core ones. These are for Foundry itself. There's a lot of neat things there, a lot of things to go through. And we also have any modules available. Right now, Dice So Nice, where you can customize how your dice look. And then we have Daggerheart. That is the settings that we are showing to you. We're going to go from the bottom up, pretty much. Maybe take this one last. And just give you a bit of an overview of what's available and what you can do. So, we have a lot of different things, and we'll show off what these do. We have, generally in the appearance, we can change the way our resources are shown. I've shown you already that resources are shown as a numeric value that fills up, and you edit them by just typing a value. You might instead want to use a pip display that will, after we reload it, add it as boxes, so you can tick them in like so instead. It's an option. We can also change how fear is displayed. You might have noticed this box, I haven't drawn attention to it, but we have a UI element floating around that you can move that shows how much fear the GM has available, and this defaults to be shown as this bar that you can increase, decrease. You can also hide it away if you have some module or you don't want it for other reasons, or you can display them as tokens, which when we resize it will display like so. You can make it any kind of formation that you would prefer, like a long one and so on. It fades out when not in use. We have, as I mentioned, you could hide away the countdowns and status effects. Well, I haven't shown that as such, but in Foundry, when you have a token out of the scene, you can right-click them to get the token HUD, as it's called. There's a lot of features here. You could target using this instead of pressing T, as mentioned. You can hide it so players cannot see it as the GM, and a lot of other features. But you can also put some effects on it, and in the system you can have vulnerable, hidden, restrained. This one is a bit special. It can be unconscious, dead, and such. There are also some Foundry standard ones that you may have a use for. Maybe you would just like to have some random pictures for any kind of situation that goes on that you think shows like, okay, I will use this to signify that something has happened to this character. It can be useful to have, but if you don't want to have that, then you can just hide them away. And instead we only have the standard ones that actually comes with the system. We have attribution. It's just something that's shown on... Do I have some quick kind of thing here? Maybe? No, it's not on this one actually. Maybe on an item. Alright, for some reason I can't find it right now, but... maybe there's a bug. There's supposed to be a text over here to just show where this item is coming from. This is from the SRD at a certain page, and so on. Maybe it's from a custom work, a third party and such. They can be defined and shown there. Or you can also choose to not take up that space if you don't want to see it right now. We have the auto-expand options, because when you're in a character, you can see that you can open up these by clicking on them to get their descriptions. You can read what they're about, you can see what Celestial Trance does and so on. And they start out closed. Maybe you prefer that, maybe you don't prefer that. You can change it here. So if you were to add characters to this list, then if we open it up again, I actually have to do a reload to get that. Then you can see that they automatically open up. And the same goes for anything else in that list. We also have auto-expand message sections, which are on by default. And you can see that when we make a roll, so let's just make it a damage roll probably. This was our druid that I opened up here. We have it open, and you can see that the damage and the targets got opened right away. They were not closed. That is what this does. So if we were to change this around, or remove everything instead, save that, and then we make a new damage roll. Then we get to see that they start out closed. You can customize it to whatever your preference is. If you have Dice So Nice enabled, this will show, otherwise it's not available. That means that you can customize how your dice look. This is the Hope dice, this is the Fear dice with this blue. We have advantage dice and disadvantage dice. You can click preview to roll one to see how it ended up the way you made it. We have a lot of the Dice So Nice options available here, possibly adding some more later on. So we can just change it in some funny way and see how this turns out. And it's worth noting that appearance settings are on a player-by-player basis, so different players can select different customization to their Hope, Fear, Advantage and Disadvantage dice, and also how they want to see resources and everything else here. We can reset this to be the standard. That is the appearance settings. We have variant rules. I mentioned before this range we could see here when we measure things, how far it goes. We could disable that, and then it would simply do the Foundry standard and measure in feet. Can be done, and I remember things now. We can also, a new feature we've added, if you have a token select. Alright, I made it dark. The things I do. Excuse me. Of course I managed to find some kind of bug. Let's see, close everything down. No? Maybe if I refresh it. Well done. It is simply a given that I will find some kind of bug when trying to show something. I will just add a light here. Big old light so we can actually see each other. So, if you... Alright, I changed that setting. So if you hover something, you can also see the distance from you to it. And if we were to change this thing back, we have this enabled, then it would be in the Daggerheart units as well. This behavior can be customized. I believe it is over here. Yes, show token distance on hover. It defaults to always being on. Maybe you only want it in encounters, when we have a combat going on. You can edit that. Maybe you don't like it at all. Then you can turn it off. Let's set it to encounters only for now. And you can see that it doesn't show up. The variant rules also has massive damage is just a custom rule that if you were to deal double the damage threshold of the highest one with an attack, then you would instead get 4 damage when the usual maximum is 3. You can enable that if you want it. And then we have action tokens. I'm going to show those off when we do a combat. So right now, well, hold on to your seats. We have automation available that you can customize how much you want to have done. You might have noticed we've rolled with hope and fear a bit to and fro, but it hasn't really changed anything as of yet. You can do it yourself, or you can turn on some automation. That is hope and fear here for the GM, for the players. And this setting is just for the GM to set. And now if we were to roll, let's see, we are currently, let's set it to 0, and we have 2 here. Let's see what we get. We get some fear. Then we get automatically a fear added. There are also the summary messages. I showed those earlier. When you took damage, you could see that message popping up here. That is, you had taken 1 stress damage, used an armor, and lost an HP. You could turn those off if you don't want them showing up. The countdown automation. I mentioned earlier that you can set a countdown to be... Well, let's see if I actually remember how to... Alright, edit. You can set the progression of it, that the fear, spotlight and so on, that when those happen it automatically progresses. You can turn that off, because when you bring things in from the SRD, the Compendium, those will be preset, so that some of them are supposed to decrease with fear, and we have set it up that way. But if you don't want it, you can turn it off globally. You can automatically progress action points. I mentioned those in the variant rules. Those are something you can tick in and out to keep track of who has gone when, how much they've been acting in an encounter, and this is automatically doing that when they take the spotlight, if you turn it on. You'll see what I mean when we do an encounter. Automatic horde damage is that there are adversaries that are called hordes, and when those drop to half hit points or lower, well, rather when they have marked half their hit points or more, then their damage will be lowered. It's a global mechanic for hordes, and it is by default on that they lower their damage without having to do anything else. You can remove that if you want to do it manually in some fashion. Effect range dependent has to do with the... let's see, I think this character had it, right? Yeah. There are some effects in the game, like paired, that is supposed to be on when you deal damage to someone in melee range. That is the range dependent part. Let's see, I don't have a grid here, so this will be a bit awkward probably, but these should be in melee. If I were to... Let's see, do I have it equipped? The wrong character. This one is on. We have paired. If I think I need the grid on actually. But it's when you get in range and you have something targeted, then it will turn on and off automatically. That is what range dependent does, even though it's not very convincing when I can't show it right now. Level up automation is that when you level up, which we will show later, then it will automatically add the different things you choose. So you choose the domain cards, you upgraded your subclass and so on. Then it will automatically add all those features. You don't have to go to the compendium and make sure you get the right stuff. Damage reduction, our default for that, you saw that when our biggie damage dealt damage there, we could reduce it by armor. When we did that, I probably have to do it again just to show. See, he has an armor on. Yep, we do some damage. Dice. I'm going to turn off this module. It's very nice during play, but right now it's more taking up time than anything else. We deal damage, and you can see that we have this little book over here. This is because we have damage reduction rules with a toggle. So when this is not crossed out, it's following the rules, so to speak. You can only use one. But if you were to turn it off, then you can do any amount of them. And we added this mostly because maybe our automation isn't perfect in some cases. Maybe there's cases we have missed. Then you can turn it off and just make sense of it yourself. And you could have this off with the toggle so that it automatically starts like that. You could have it permanently off. You can just do whatever you want. You can have it on and not have this because you trust our automation, and props to you. I will leave this at this as it is. So, and yes, these scroll text, you might have noticed that when we take damage, let's see, he's not gonna die, and we take some damage, you get this text going over here. That is what this is. You can turn that off if you don't want this going on as a hint or visual flair on the canvas. I will jump to roles actually. This section might be misconstrued. We probably need some better texts here. What this does is, I mentioned before that if you... Actually, before I forget, I will turn off Dice So Nice, just so we don't get dice all the time. It just makes it a bit quicker. If we have that setting here again, like this, boom. I mentioned that you can usually skip over getting a dialogue by holding shift, which I'm doing now, and you just get the roll. This behavior is to reverse that. So you could enable both of these, and then I'm not holding shift now. Oh, well, that's funny. Is it not set up yet? Alright, it's not set up on the traits apparently. That's good to know, that's a bug. But if I was to do an attack and I'm not holding shift, it will just roll. You have to hold shift now to get it instead. You might prefer it that way, but it's good to know that it's not automation for hope or fear or anything. It's specifically to handle that, getting the dialogue or not. Same deal here, that if you enable reaction rolls, damage healing rolls, that means that when you do an attack, it will immediately roll the damage. If you have it like this, you don't get a dialogue for it, nothing, it just rolls, as if you had pressed shift, so to speak. You can have it with the dialogue. So the behavior here, if I was to show it, would be I make the attack, because like that, and then you immediately got the pop-up for rolling damage as well. If you had it at always instead, then it would just have rolled damage. So you can do some automation, but you might miss some options by doing that. So it depends on your use case. Yes, it can also go all the way, so you could also directly apply damage healing and effects that happen to the things you had targeted before making the roll. So you could automate it the whole way through. But that does run the risk of missing some custom things, because Daggerheart rules like to have a lot of custom stuff going on, reactions and so on. So it's a bit at your own peril, and we might reconsider this at some point, but that is what it is. Triggers, that's for later. I mentioned that in advanced. It's nothing that most users need to concern themselves with, because it's more program-y oriented, so to speak. I showed earlier, well, I didn't show per se, but I noticed here that if you were to max out you marked all your hit points, you can see that you're supposed to make a death move. This is also displayed with an icon here, just so that you can immediately notice on the canvas. That is what this is about. Starting here, the defeated handling. That is what happened right here. You reached maximum, then we had a character, and the default status then is that it shows this death move. You can change what it's supposed to show if you have some other kind of logic you prefer. When an adversary is defeated, they default to being dead. You could make that unconscious or defeated, depending on the kind of vibe you have going on in your campaign world. Companions by default are defeated, because companions don't die by the rules. They run away, or in other ways make themselves scarce. You can also edit what kind of image is shown. This death roll right now, death move, is this kind of purple heart image. You can edit which one that is. You can edit what the dead is, and so on. Do anything you prefer. And this overlay is simply, you can see that this takes up a large space on this. If that is not enabled, then it would instead show like this, a small thing. So it's as you prefer. And we have two on the same canvas here, so it kind of copies over. The automation is that when you make a death move, you can do that over here. We've added that recently. In Daggerheart, you can avoid death, you can risk it all, or you can do a blaze of glory. And as you do that, if the automation is on, then it will change the status on the character. This one was removed now, so I'll add it back. If we were to avoid death, and we are level 1, so we will succeed. You cannot fail that one at level 1. It will roll a fate roll. You're supposed to roll a d12, but if you roll... I don't actually remember. Is it lower beat or not? Well, all the same. You would roll it and compare it to your level, and if you roll above, you have avoided a new scar, and you are instead unconscious for the rest of the battle, and no scar given. If you were to roll lower than your level, then you would gain a scar, and I can show that later, because I need to raise my level to do that. That is the automation. If you did not have it on, then you would still roll the fate dice, but this would not happen. It would not change to unconscious, and it would not add any scar or anything of the like. If I was to, when I go, that's also part of it, that when you heal up, then you're no longer unconscious. The same thing goes that you could risk it all, then you would roll your dice and see if you live or die. This is see which dice rolls higher. I rolled a critical. That means that you cleared all the stress and HP and you're no longer unconscious, anything like that. You could also die, or you could have a normal result where you get a dialogue pop up that lets you choose how much hit points to regain, how much stress to regain. Also, you can do a blaze of glory that will give you a active effect going on your character. I'll actually show it, because if you do that, then you get... Alright, you actually die as well, that's true. A bit anticlimactic maybe, but you do. I haven't mentioned it per se, although you've seen it. All the effects that are on your character, like this, you can also see them in the top right, which gives you, as it says, an option to right-click to remove it in a handy way without having to go into the effects side here to delete something. But when Blaze of Glory is on, then any roll you do will automatically be a critical. As you can see there was no dialogue, nothing, because it's just a critical. It's your final moment, make it glorious. That is done. And those are the death moves. You can enable, disable that logic as you please. I don't think I missed anything. Triggers later. Yep, that's kind of it. Those are a lot of our settings as it is right now. This one goes into the action tokens. I will show that as part of the combat. What did I have up next? Encounters. That is the combat. What do you know? Let's go to another scene. Just a silly little map that I had in some old world of mine, where I have made two characters over here ahead of time, and of course they are the art-wise challenged because I'm not using any custom art here. This is a party token. This shows that these two characters are in this party. You can see their resources summarized. You can have an inventory that is not on any character but on the party. It can be useful for some campaign things, maybe if you're playing Colossus or any other frame that has some custom resources or such. But what you can also do with a party is that when you right-click the HUD here, it has a retrieve party tokens. We can pull everyone in because they're part of the party, because then maybe you just want to have this token and not everyone fooling around. And when you do want them fooling around, you can pull them out again. We call that the clown car. But party aside, we have these two characters over here. And as far as an encounter goes on, I will make myself be the wizard for damage purposes. And yes, in this one, just a little funny thing, because we are playing Foundry, it has all kinds of nice features you can learn about in different ways. This is a hidden wall that will open down, and oh, we ran into some trouble over here. And we have an encounter brewing. This is handled in the combat encounter. You don't have to make use of it, but it's a handy feature that Foundry brings along. You can create an encounter, just have it open, and then add combatants, as it's called. You can also just drag select anyone you like, or click on anyone individually, and then add them to the combat. You can see that we have 2 characters with 4 adversaries against them. We have not begun the encounter yet, but it's there. A little helping thing in Daggerheart, you can measure combats and the adversaries in them by battle points, BP. And there's a formula for it, depending on how many characters that's in it. You then take a bruiser is worth a certain amount, these minions are worth a certain amount, and so on. And we show that calculation up here. Currently, we have, so to speak, spent 6 out of 8 points of our budget. I'm using quotation marks, because you don't have to fill it up. There's a lot of different thoughts about this. But you can see here that, for instance, we spent 4 BP for each bruiser adversary, we spent 1 for a group of minions equal to the size of the party, and we made 1 support here, so that's 6 points. There's also modifiers that you can, like, you don't have to make use of this, it's just for help. But maybe you say, oh, this should be very dangerous, so we have up to 10 points to spend. And it should be a quick fight, so it's a bit cheap. Or maybe you say that, oh, this character actually found this hidden door by leaning against it, and it opened and he fell in. Oh, that was a bad situation. So maybe this fight should be more dangerous. We've added the option from the book that you can have every adversary have some extra damage to just make it a little more dangerous. Now we have 6 out of 6 because we lowered the amount available. Any adversaries you toss into this encounter will also get this buff. That is that. If we were to start this encounter, there is no initiative in Daggerheart. We simply have the spotlight moving around as the narrative dictates, and the players starting off. Unless something special is happening. And what we've done is that you can give the spotlight as the GM to any character or adversary, and if you do so, then, well, this is an ugly image. It is the Foundry default showing who is active. You can change that around, and I would recommend it. But I forgot to do so. So right now we have the warrior going on. He would take his turn, he would move around within range here. Maybe he says that, or actually, when you drag a token around you can also see the distance. So maybe you move close and you want to attack something. You would target this minion, you would make a longsword attack, let's say. And, we set those settings to always prompt the damage automatically, if you recall. And we have combat training, which deals more damage. So we make an attack. We dealt 14 damage to him, we would deal that damage, and he would be dead. And this is a minion. This is not automated, but in this case, for every minion you slay, it would kill some more minions within range, because you cut them down. And it's a cool cinematic moment. And in this case, we can mark this one as dead as well. And let's say that then this turn is over, and let's see, what did I rolled with fear. So we got some automatic fear over here. I didn't notice it happening because I'm busy right now. But that means that the turn goes over to the GM, who also has fear available to spend on more things, and he would give the spotlight to someone else, maybe to the Hexer, who could do some mean things to the party over here. He could decide to curse this character, perhaps the wizard. So we would use this ability, and we have a target here, as you can see, and we would apply this effect to him. You can see this effect, that whenever you roll with hope, the Hexer can mark a stress to make the roll be with fear instead. That is not automated at the moment. There are more things to do and some that are best handled manually, but this will remind you that it's there, so that you can make that happen in the narrative as it so occurs. Maybe the GM would spend a fear to activate the jagged knife knee breaker here, and so on, so fro. That is combat. Let's see, was there something I wanted to show specifically here? I don't think so, per se. No, it's kind of simple like that. This hand, if you are on the player perspective, you also have a hand available on yourself, but that is for requesting the spotlight. That will just make it glow here for the GM, so they can have it known that you want the spotlight. Something that you may not have use for. That is also the... Actually, let's turn this on, and let's have this one. This setting is that... actually, I can't show it right now, but when someone requests the spotlight, it's usually just in the same order. You can enable this, which will make a queue up here for who requested it latest, so on, first in, first out order. We don't have it by default because we kind of feel that kind of recreates initiative, which is not necessarily a good thing, but if you have a use for it, you can use it. I enabled action tokens right now. You have to refresh the page to get it going, but then you can see that you have these tokens that can be automated whenever you take the spotlight to decrease, and that's the Daggerheart rule way to give you an idea, like, okay, this wizard has gone a lot of times, maybe he should not go again for a while. It's a tool if you have use for it. Combat is simple like that. We have leveling up, because of course they beat all these characters. They're all dead and gone, this guy is defeated and probably sulking in the corner, and they're questioning him and so on and so forth. They're taking a downtime and a level up happened. Leveling up is something you do in the sheet. You can alter this value when it's narratively right and level up, which will show you this same thing. You can level up. And this should be familiar. It's the Daggerheart tiers when you have choices. Every time you level up, you have two options that you can pick in here. So say for instance that this wizard would like to gain 1 more hit point so he doesn't die, and he wants to increase his traits. You've chosen that, and then you get to make any further choices based on that. He moved to tier 2 right now, as that is level 2. It starts that new tier. That means you get a new experience. So he has experience number 3. Yay. And we can pick 2 traits to increase, and a new domain card that is up to level 2, but it can be lower. So we have gained the Book of Vagras. And this is what changed, because our damage thresholds also increased by 1 every time we level. And proficiency in this case, because we increased to the next tier. That is leveling up. Simple like that. If you did not have it automated, then you would have to pull in the different features and changes on your own. And you can also level down. That will simply remove everything that you picked. You can see that the HP and proficiency lowered again. And any cards that were still here that you picked would be removed. That works out. There is not a special case per se, but if I was to create a ranger that has a companion, actually with the beastbound is better there, because they have the companion. I'm just making something quick here. We have... That is not spelled correctly, but it will do. It's untouchable, nature card, something like this. We have a character, and we also want a companion for this character. A companion has its own sheet, it has an attack, it has experiences that are currently not named. You can customize them in the same way as for a character. But an important part is that you should choose a partner who has this companion. That is character 2, the unique name here. And you can see it has a partner, and then a lot of the data starts working properly. When you level up, we level up our character, and you just make it very simple. We give him more hit points, we gave him experience, and like that. You also get a pop-up here immediately. Would you like to level him right away? can do it, you cannot do it, but you can see that they are in lockstep, so to speak. When you've leveled up this one, then you get a level up here as well. Because they level up individually. We can choose here to gain an additional stress slot. We can gain either the visual here. I remember that being bugged. If you want more damage, more range, give it a new experience, and we get that. So link up your companions if you have a Ranger Beastbound. That happens, and I think that is the basic rundown of a lot of things in the system. There's more going on, definitely, but I can't remember all of it right now. It's hard to keep all of it. Hope it's been helpful. I'm going to move on to a bit of advanced things now. How advanced it actually is, I don't know. I try to categorize it in some fashion. But if we were to, let's say, make a new Adversary, they're kind of good for this, because if you homebrew, if you make a lot of stuff, then you definitely make more adversaries all the time. Let's actually start with the size. I mentioned it before, but Daggerheart actually doesn't have any information for how large something is. They don't have any grid information, like a dragon should be 3x3 and this one 1x1. And initially we had nothing for it either, but we added a little bit of it. You don't have to make use of it, you can alter it, but we added some categories because we think it makes sense, simply. There should be some size allowances to it. Actually, you can edit this in the adversary here, put it in some category, from tiny all the way to gargantuan, or just make it custom. So if I was to increase him to huge, he gets big, because our standard is 3x3 for that. That is something you can edit. I believe this is in Homebrew. Yeah. You have token sizes here. These are our default sizes for these, which you can edit if you have some other idea for them. And then you can customize them, which one is used. If you select custom instead, then this token will simply follow in Foundry. You can edit the token properties, and you can edit the exact dimensions. So he should be, well, this will look silly, but I will make him 2x5. And if I pull him out this way, he should be kind of funky like that. Yeah. That can be done. That is the sizing. I will return him to not small, medium. You can customize a lot of things about the adversary, their hit points and so on, their descriptions, their tactics, which kind of type they are, which tier, what their difficulty number is, and such. You can customize their attacks, the damage they deal, and to what kind of resource they deal the damage. This is their standard attack, if they have any experiences. And you can make features, and this is what I wanted to go through. Characters also have features, items can have features. They're a very standard, common thing in the system. A feature is a bit of a collection, simply. It's a collection of actions and effects that describe some feature you have in the system. For instance, Luckbender of the Fairy Ancestry is a feature, the Ranger's Focus is a feature, and so on. You can decide if this is a passive action or a reaction, first of all. You can make actions on them. These are the buttons that show up under here, that lets you send rolls to chat and do other things. So if I was to make this a damage action, then you are able to, this is the name of it, you can say, the description. You can either make a custom one, or it will inherit the one that is in the feature, which is none at the moment. Give it an icon. You can change if it has a specific amount of uses. Maybe it's once per long rest, or maybe per session, or so forth. You can set that up here. You can add a cost to it. Maybe it costs 1 fear to use this ability. You can set up what it targets, how many, and at what range. You can add the effects here are dependent on what kind of action it is. This is a damage action, so we can add damage here, which can be 1d6 plus an amount to hit points. It is magical physical damage. You can make it a custom formula. You can also, all actions are able to apply effects, and those are the things you've seen, like when we had a curse going on that shows up in the top right when it's applied. These can be customized. You can give them pictures, names, make a description for it, and you can edit what they do. We've added some help here, but this is a bit of a complicated thing to go through in some cases. But say that you want this feature to increase the hit points of a character. So we make it the max hit points. Make it 2. So when this feature is done to someone, well, this is kind of paradoxical. We're dealing damage and we're increasing their max HP. But I'm just making a silly thing here. You can do that. You can make it direct damage and so forth. You can make all kinds of actions. These are honestly too many. I can't go through all of these right now, but they're available. Maybe I'll make another video specifically about that. We'll see. Let's just go to Homebrew, because I remember I actually skipped over that menu. Wholesale. You can set up a lot of things here to make your game different than what's expected by the rules. By the rules, you can max have 12 fear. You can change that around. Maximum of 6 hope. You can change that. Characters are supposed to have 2 domains, but you can alter that. You have 5 cards in the loadout. You can alter that. And this is the standard array of your traits, the token sizes as mentioned, and the currency. Because maybe in your world they are named different things, these denominations, or maybe you don't want all of these. Maybe you just have gold coins, and that's it. So if you open up your inventory, you only have gold. So that is as you please. The rest of these are a bit of deeper homebrew additions. The domains. All the different domain cards belong to a domain. You can add new ones. This is a bit of a silly placeholder that shouldn't be there, but oh well. You can add a new one, and you make it a new name. Let's call it... Yes, like make it the meme domain, because I'm very serious right now. You can give it a description, you can give it a image to make it something special, and then when you make items in the world, you make a domain card, then you would have that domain available. You can make it a meme card. A lot of options here as well to edit things. That can be done. Modules can also set this to have it added to this list, but that is not done here. That is done in a module. It's a simple way to do it, but it's not gone over in this video. You can add custom adversary types. They don't have a big effect as such, but it can be nice still to be able to make them categorized as you please, this new adversary type. Maybe you want to make it a colossus or something else, just to have it categorized in that way. That was the type. Then we have weapon features, armor features, and downtime moves. Item features. The different items in the game, the weapons and armor. Let's see, we open up here. We can see that this shield has protective. That is a item feature. You can see those under settings. Here we have this list going on. And you're able to add to this. You can make wholesale new features that you can slap onto items in an easy way. You don't have to do this. You can just add actions directly to a item. You can add an effect directly to it. This protective comes from this protective, but you could just add the feature, rather the effect, if it's just a one-shot thing and you don't think you have to make it again and again. But if you want to do that, you can simply add a armor feature, and you can edit what it's like, description, picture, name. You can give it some actions, you can give it an effect, and yes, this is a very unique armor feature, but this will then show up if we were to make a new armor. Go to settings. Oh, I was blind, it was up there. This is the new item feature, and then it gets this new effect we added. That happens. Same thing happens for weapons and downtime. You saw earlier when we're taking a downtime, we have our tend to wounds, clear stress, and so on. You can add new moves to this. Maybe they're in your campaign frame, maybe you have a custom fun idea. You do that, you can give it an icon. These are found on Font Awesome. They're the icons used by Foundry to get these simple ones. You don't have to type one in, but you can do that just to get this image, otherwise it's missing. Give it a name, image, description, and action, something that happens when you click on it. You don't have to. It can just be a description. Maybe you're just keeping watch, and what that means is more narrative than an actual action. But say that we add this keep watch. We give it some kind of fun image because we haven't done that much today. Let's make it a settlement thingy, and we call it this. We keep watch. Let's see, I can just. This is not a good image, but it is a image, so I will show it. Make it something, and just simple like that. We save this. Now that we take a short rest, you can see that we can keep watch. You can see the text and everything. And we do that. It's sent to chat as a message. That is customization you can do. I think that covered most of that. The one thing that is left on this docket here is triggers, and that is, well, the most difficult feature to make use of. It is very much a programming kind of thing, but it is also a very powerful feature. It's something when you have a strange kind of thing that should happen that's really non-standard. You can make it happen by essentially calling a macro. That is some custom kind of coding language application you've come up with, but you're calling it at a specific time. I can show this by adding, let's see, the community. The Seaborn community has Know the Tide. You're supposed to gain tokens on this every time you roll with fear. So this is an example of it. If I was to add Know the Tide to this character, let's see, maybe I have to be, yeah, I got it. I currently have 0 of these, but this one has a trigger on it. So if I was to make a roll now, and I'm going to slant it so I probably get fear, you can see that I got Know the Tide, gained a token. That is a trigger. You can see that on this action, that there is a trigger. And there is some information on this in the wiki, how exactly it's done. That will be expanded upon as time goes on, as more triggers are available, and so on. But this is not something that you typically have to concern yourself with. We prefer making more easy to use GUI options, but sometimes some things are best done this way. Yes, I have no doubt I have forgotten a bunch of things, and there's more things that people are wondering about, but I think that's going to be it for this video. I hope it's helpful to someone, and have some fun, roll with fear and hope.